Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra, Mahamudra for the people. I'm sorry, I have a cold, so I'm not feeling too hot today. But it's lovely to see everybody, and yeah, I think because I know I had mentioned last week we would do some of the kind of yogic exercises, but because I'm under the weather, we're gonna have to put that back maybe one more week till next week, if that's okay. Yeah, so I was thinking today we could go just move gently into the next text in this collection, which is a Mahamudra text by Virupa, the Mahasiddha Virupa. And the Mahasiddha Virupa is very fascinating. He was instrumental in so many different early Vajrayana lineage transmissions and maybe even like founding. So it's believed that Virupa was the earliest revealer of, for example, Lama Dusuma practice, and the first revealer of Chinnamasta practice, the seven-headed Vajrayogini, the first person to reveal Nairatma practice. So Nairatma functions as the consort, but she's also, full-blown Buddha in her own regard of Hevajra. He was also a Nath yogi, so in a very early important lineage holder of pranayama, techniques, hatha yoga techniques. He is pretty amazing, and I think the thing that's also quite interesting about him, there's a personage from South India of around the same time named Virupaksha, who might be the same person as Virupa, and Virupaksha was also this Hindu Nath yogi too. So he's a very fascinating person with respect to this very natural blending of Hindu Tantra and Buddhist Tantra, much to the chagrin of people who like to keep everything in little separate boxes. So I love him for many reasons, but I have a very close friend who is a scholar on Virupa, who is telling me that he came across a text by Virupa. And you often see him depicted. I've got this like big statue of him, but he's got this big belly like me, which is why I identify with him. And his finger is pointing up at the sun. He's holding the sun in its place as he drinks all this beer, which I used to be able to do. But he's decked with flowers everywhere, flowers in his hair. In some cases, his meditation belt is made out of flowers. And there's this really fascinating scriptural reference where he says that you should make flower offerings everywhere, but you should never buy them. You should never pay for flowers. You should always take them from charnel grounds, the flowers that were offered to the dead. And so he was he was a loose guy, which is good because Mahamudra is a loose practice. You can't really, just like Dzogchen, you can't white knuckle your way through these practices. So this text, this song, which is known as the Doha Kosha Nama, right, or the Doha Treasure, is the next song in this collection, 8 Dohas. And I'm actually going to deviate from this translation that I have and use Keith Dowman's translation. So Keith Dowman had translated it, and it's you can find it in this Mahamudra book that he wrote with the nice the marbled cover, one of the many marbled Keith Dowman volumes. And so anyway, it's a lovely song. Rupa's a lovely man. Before we go on, though, I want to see if anybody has any questions from last week or anything that may have come up over the course of the week in your practice. And then from there, we'll move into a little bit of practice. And then from there, we'll move into the text. And no, okay. Yeah, good. All right. So let's take a moment to settle, allowing your body to settle into a relaxed state, letting your body be settle like a mountain. Let your gaze focus on non-referential space. Your breath be natural. Let go of the past. Let go of the future. Release yourself from the present moment needing to be anything. Try not to control. Try not to make anything happen, figure anything out. And rest into this natural, stainless luminosity of your mind. And just slowly bring yourself back. Okay. So I'm going to be looking down, and the only reason why is because I'm looking at a book. And sorry, maybe I'll. So in this text, the Dohakosha Nama, Virupa's Dohakosha, it begins with an homage to Vajrasattva first, and then to Bhagavati Nairatma. And again, this homage to both of them, the homage to Vajrasattva's, homage to the vast primordial purity of mind, right? Which is what the essence of Vajrasattva is. And then Nairatma is the female Buddha who was the, I guess we could say, the spiritual partner of the Buddha Hevajra, to whom Virupa had a very close connection. And so, much like the other text by Saraha that we encountered and just went through, this is divided into several sections. Well, 3, I believe it is. Yeah, and then each section, of course, is divided into subsections. So today we'll probably be focusing primarily on the first section, which is about Mahamudra itself, the basis of the natural condition. And again, forgive me, I'm slightly snotty and sore throaty. So, and if I'm mumbling, let me know so I can speak up appropriately. So this begins again because it's a doha. Emaho. Mahamudra is the sameness of samsara and nirvana. Because it knows no origin, it is as pure as the sky. Because it is free of identity, it is signless. Because it is formless, it has no manifestation. It cannot be examined or analyzed. It cannot be exemplified. Yet it is not defined by non-example. It transcends intellectual expression. And so again, not particularly new from what we've seen up to this point. But again, for us and our relative experience of suffering, this first line in particular, Mahamudra is the sameness of samsara and nirvana, because it knows no origin. It is as pure as the sky, is a great place for us to be able to explore, right? And so, all of these texts, one can collect all of these texts, and Lord knows the last time I was preparing for the last class, I found books I didn't know I had that I brought back from India. So there are many things, you can collect a lot of these things. But this first line is really what the whole point is, right? This recognition of the sameness of samsara and nirvana. And so as we were just practicing, and actually, as I had mentioned while we were doing the Saraha song previously, this idea of amanasikara, this kind of stillness of mind, not stillness in a forced way, but this resting into the experience of mind that is beyond I guess you could say beyond reaction. So when I stopped for a little while, I was trying to think, what is the right word? And what came to mind is throwing a pebble into a lake and there being absolutely no ripples, right? Like that, right? This experience of mind, phenomenon, everything that we're, going through, traversing through. but with no reactivity, right? And to do this without force, right? This is we're not trying to quell, we're not trying to apply an antidote, we're not trying to soothe specifically, right? To really, the reason why I'm being slow with words is because I'm trying not to use words that we've used before, because um, as we saw before and we'll see in the future, this evades words, right? So why I wanted to say rest into this experience of stillness, but this is complicated because there is no rest, right? This is not about settling, right? It's not about forcing anything to settle. But I guess you could say being without consequence, right? Or regarding or experiencing without subsequent reaction, energy, reflexiveness. And so what I'm doing right now is not trying to translate anything. It's trying to find the right words. And it's not in the song, but this is important to do, right? To unpack the experience. Um, you know, what does it mean to get out of our stupid mind, stupid brain of just like cut and paste? We have, you know, like William S. Burroughs, right? Like cut and paste, in order to make these poems, cut and paste from various kinds of dohas and be like, oh, it's like this. It's Saraha says this, Maitrapa says this, Rupa says that. But at some point, like if we really want awakening authentically, we need to really know what we're experiencing, right? And that means we need to be able to experience, and we don't have to begin to define, but if we are to express, we have to be able to express in a way that accurately reflects what is expressed, right? And so this means, it just means we need to be a little careful with words. So Mahamudra is the sameness of samsara and nirvana because it knows no origin. It is as pure as the sky. Because it is free of identity, it is signless. Because it is formless, it has no manifestation. It cannot be examined or analyzed. It cannot be exemplified. Yet it is not defined by non-example. It transcends intellectual expression. So for anybody who's trying to figure this out, it can't be. So put that down. Don't worry about it. And the kindness of this, or the mitzvah of Varupa's first stanza is like, look, man, like it can't be done. I've tried it. Look, I've got all these flowers and they're all from charnel grounds, and I've created all of these practices, Chinnamasta, Padalamo Dasoma, Naivatma. Like, I've speak with Buddhas, I've mastered pranayama, and this cannot be expressed by intellect. Right. And so that being said, we're like Prometheus, right? We don't listen. And so try to do it, try to explain it to yourself, right? If that helps, right? To wear those muscles out, to just, yeah, try. The best way to learn is through experience. And so he goes on in the next stanza. Mahamudra does not last, yet it has no end. It is not samsara, yet not nirvana. It is no appearance, yet not emptiness. It has no substance, yet non-insubstantial. It is not unborn, nor the natural state. It is not what transcends the intellect, nor is it existent, yet non-existent. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can do it.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Um, I I was wondering, like, when I first was practicing, when I first was learning about the Dharma, and I started to hear about Sokchen and Mahamudra and Nidhamaka, I remember being told, like, oh, it's really hard to explain. It's really maybe for advanced students, or you know it's too complex or something. And I'm wondering for you, what point, or like, how do you sort of like take the leap, I guess, of like trusting that you can understand it, that like that your experience is like trustworthy, or something, like how do you, like how for you, was there a point at which you were like, oh, this is a complicated, like I'm a baby Dharma person, and then go to, no, this is actually pretty amazing. I do think I have had some glimpse or something like that. Like, I guess maybe it's it does feel healthy, good. It feels really good to be at that place of like, to say like, well, I probably don't, um, like to be humble, I guess.
Mhm.
But it also feels sort of good to say, and I do have some relationship to this. So
Mhm.
yeah, I wonder if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that a couple things. The first is that like Varupa points out, if one is just going to look into this through books, so songs, so for example, dohas and commentaries on dohas, etc. We're only going to understand it intellectually, right? And his whole point is that it cannot be understood intellectually. It can only be practiced, right? And there's a long history, actually, this goes back quite far, of there being kind of divergent opinions around how and when these kinds of things should be introduced to practitioners. And so, like, the earliest we know was a Mahasiddha Maitreya, right? Who his real kind of MO was to introduce this to people, see what they see whether they got it, and then apply a subsequent instruction, see if they got it, and then if not, then move on to a more kind of gradual relationship to this, right? Now, the next in line who really kind of excelled at this technique was Gampopa, right? And so Gampopa really made a name for himself in introducing Mahamudra straight off the bat for people, and to see if people connected, right? Then why not continue on with the practice? Um, in my case, I had a kind of similar introduction to this as well, because my root teacher introduced me to Mahamudra and Trekja like 5 days after meeting her, you know, in the mid 90s. And she didn't really explain what she was doing. She gave pointing out instructions twice, over the course of about a month. And both times, completely blew me away. And at a later date, I received them from like from Boka Rinpoche, and then in other circumstances, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and it was, the experiences were exactly the same. So she had the ability to do it. There are a couple things, like, there's kind of the teacher. Some teachers are quite adept at helping to transmit the experience, right? So there's part of it. It's not just us as the student, who are right here, and we're like, oh, I'm not particularly bright, and I don't know if I'm getting this. The other part is, for lack of a better term, like the theology behind this, or the Buddhology, perhaps, or the Mahamudralogy of this, with both Mahamudra and Dzogchen, right? We're starting from this point that the mind is already like this to begin with, right? So there does not necessarily need to be a progressive approach to it. Now, there is a big difference, between kind of the way Mahamudra has been taught over time in Tibet from these earlier dohas, right? So, these kind of systems of Mahamudra have included periods of practice of shamatha, periods of practice of vipassana, periods of practice of learning how to be able to practice them together, and then this kind of, launching us into the experience of Mahamudra. So a lot of what you find in the Karmakaju tradition in particular, and a lot of the commentaries around it, offer that kind of nice, like, gradual on-ramp. But yeah, and this is where, like, I particularly admire both the Dzogchen, these early Mahamudra texts, and Chan, is the being pushed right into the direct experience without a lot of conceptual knowledge to get in the way, right? The more we know, and we find this both in Mahamudra instruction and in Dzogchen instruction, the more we think we know, the more difficult the slog is, right? Because we have to, essentially unlearn a lot of our ideas about the structure, the patterning, the path, right? There's no gradual. So, I don't mean to criticize Lam Rim, but Lam Rim is an invention, right? Like, it is a fabricated, structured path, right? So you have this, like, brilliance, my cup of tea, right? The brilliance of the natural state. And then you have a pedagogy, a technique to be able to recognize it, right? And so this is a very nice, like, gradual path gets us there. And because it's gradual, it's without its pitfalls, or without many pitfalls, the pitfalls of a more sudden kind of relationship to it, where we can fall into error, and maybe practice incorrectly for a little while. But I do feel like there tends to be a natural progression towards clarity and insight, so that you end up there usually anyway, right? The big thing, though, is learning how to trust ourselves, right? Like, and again, it's I've never really been big on Dharma teachers who have made me feel stupid, right? And yet there are some Dharma teachers and some Dharma organizations that really do, they're not particularly interested in empowering everybody to be able to directly experience this, right? And, I'm going to feel, whatever, like, jaded. Like, an organized religion doesn't want people to experience the fruit, because they're going to want to keep people, in the gift shop, as it were, spending the money, right, doing all that stuff, helping with all these, Dharma projects, etc. So again, why I like Keith Dowman, a lot of people don't like Keith Dowman, but I really like Keith Dowman, is this radical nature to this, right? Mahamudra is radical, right? Hatha Yoga is radical. And they're radical in the sense that they very quickly offer a mirror to be able to show us that most of what we're encountering is really our mind, right? And it's not that all the objects in front of me are made out of my mind specifically, but it is that all of the meaning and the conceptual designation and relationship to is created by me. It wasn't created by Marianne. It wasn't created by Lorena or Travis or Jamie or Melissa or you. You know, it wasn't created by, Boomy Sparsha Tech. It wasn't created by Remy. It wasn't created by Rodrigo or Richard. You know, it was just, and so there's like an element of like, heartbreak to the question as well, because it reminds me a little bit of that kids book, Are You My Mother? With this little bird, who's like gets separated from its mother, and it asks all these like, dog, a cow, like a big earth moving, machine, are you my mother? Are you my mother? And really what is our mother? Our mother is, the natural state. And it's right here. It's right here. And so like, these, practices are described as the highest practice, right? So Mahamudra is like, the highest practice of the Kaji tradition, or Hatha Yoga is the highest practice of, the Nyingma tradition, right? But they're also our natural state. So I guess the question is can we unlearn being unqualified, right? And open up to, as we sit, we're sitting with the same prima materia as Milarepa, as Longchenpa, as Virupa, as Sraha. It is the same mind. It's a different time. Right? I don't have stolen flowers all over me. I have the same belly though. So I've got that going for me. But the immediacy of now. I think the other thing is, and then I'll move on to Lorena's question, that's worth considering is, at the end of Milarepa's biography, there's this point where Milarepa is dying, and this one student of his, Saban comes, and it's like, Milarepa, like, please tell us like who you're the reincarnation of, because you must be the reincarnation of someone incredible because of everything you've done. And he was like, oh, thank you, for your nice words. And, when you say that, you basically belittle the Dharma, right? The Dharma has the ability to cause this transformation. The Dharma has this ability to cause this realization. It's the Dharma, right? And it's us. And likewise for us, we can say, oh, baby step, baby step, baby steps, but then, if Rupa were in the room with us, he would probably smack us, and be like, oh, what are you talking about? Baby steps. This is our natural face. This is who we are, And so there has to be, and I've, brought this up before, I can't remember in this context, I think in the Hatha Yoga class, but like the audacity of breaking the cycle, right? And the audacity of trusting our experience, and the audacity of showing up and showing up and showing up. Is that helpful?
Yeah, you know what? Kind of one of the hits that I get from your response is around contradiction, and there's always a kind of desire for things to be linear or simple or something. my first experience was at a Gelugpa monastery, and like I lived there for a long time, trained there for a long time, and I think there's a lot of distrust in that lineage about Sokchan and Mahamudra and stuff like that. And but when I think about what was really helpful for me when I first came onto the path, it was like really being shown the way that I obscure my basic nature, like really having that kind of shown in a very systemic kind of way. And then I think looking back at my experience, like through my whole life, I think one of the things that gives me confidence in Mahamudra and maybe let's say the basic nature of mind is seeing where it showed up in my life already, like that becoming familiar with it, like through practices and stuff. And is this kind of and then saying like, whoa, when I was on that hike and I saw Mount Hood, or when I broke my arm and like everything, whatever it was, there's these moments that I can reflect on and then think, that was it. Like, wow, like that cut through all of my, like my my goggles or whatever. But yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
a bit about it.
Thank you, Gendon. Yeah, Lorena.
Hi,
Hi.
and hi everyone. So nice to be here with you all again. Yeah, what's come to my mind, and thank you to the last person who shared, I really appreciate it. Is I just landed back in Denver after visiting my mom for 2 weeks in New Jersey. And before that, I did a month-long retreat with Zen folks, and man, was that real. So I don't know, I guess what's coming to my mind is I'm feeling pretty good today. And sadly, that's not regular because of the anxiety and the neurosis and the stuff that I have lived with that brings me to the path, the trauma. But I think the month-long retreat, as hard as that was, I thought I'd give those Zen folks a try. So I was looking for some discipline. It was a bit much, but it was good. I left there feeling more grounded. I was able to a few days later go visit my mom, and that was the usual, like it just kind of hard, very hard. Today I feel good. I'm here, and I woke up early with the intention of sitting, but my bedroom was like all undone because I just came in with my luggage and whatnot. I just allowed myself to flow into just taking apart, organizing, putting away, just moving with what was needed, what I felt I needed to do. And so I'm wondering about, I have felt like what you're describing to me just feels like ordinary non-reactivity of the mind, just being able to flow and feel okay, feel some kind of I'm okay movement. And I felt this, of course, before, and I wish to live in this state. And what I realized, and I guess part of what I wanted to ask you was, I'm not working right now, which is a huge blessing and just privilege that I'm earning money without having to work right now. I'm on a leave. And so I don't have that. I have the pressure of what the fuck am I going to do after that money runs out, and my mother with her mild dementia that I just visited, but all of that and my own stuff that I woke up early and I went to practice, but my practice turned into clean your room. And that felt really good. And I have just continued to move through the day. And normally I get caught up in the neuroses of, oh, should have sat, should have gotten up and gone to sit right away, done yoga, et cetera, et cetera. And just, I should all over myself. And I feel those voices of not good enough that, that I've grown up with, that I'm working to move through.
Mhm.
And today that didn't happen. And it feels, I guess, liberating and kind of Mahamudra-ish in what I imagine. Ordinary, just okayness.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering about that. I don't know that that's something that I pray that's something I can work to sustain without grasping, without just being natural with myself, just being like, okay, love, like, what do we need to do right now? And not sitting and arguing with myself and shitting on myself, but just like, well, the floor needs cleaning. Let me work on that and be present. So I don't know if that any of that makes sense, but thank you for listening. And I'd love your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lorena. So yeah, I mean, there's this Tibetan term Tamaki Shepa, which is like basically refers to the ordinary mind. No, ordinary mind, not necessarily being ordinary cognitive discursive mind, but this experience of mind that is able to arise without friction, right? Without the kind of wasted energy, so to speak, of neurosis, of reactivity, of self-consciousness. And I think the thing that can be a little hard about approaching Mahamudra very, very formally, right, is we're sitting and we're trying to be serious and, trying to control the experience. And, getting back to Gendon's question as well, like, am I doing this right? Is this right? Is this authentic experience? How can you not have an authentic experience? Everything that is happening is happening. But yes, this ordinariness, the ordinariness of being in your apartment, right? The ordinariness of the way the light comes in. There's stuff to do, and the ordinariness of that stuff to do passing through our mind, but without the, hey, get out of here, or without the, hey, this is Dharma practice now, not, I've got to get ready for tax time, or, just effortless flow, effortless, and this is hard. And it's hard, especially, when our practice is very formal and we're like, I gotta get the heck out of here, man. Like, and we're strained, our body's strained, we've got perfect posture. It's as if our mind is trying to grind away to experience awareness. There's a restfulness and an ease associated with both Mahamudra and Dzogchen that is really important. And this naturalness, I think, with this last, the second stanza, so in the first one, it says, Mahamudra is the sameness of samsara and nirvana, on the first line of the first stanza. Second stanza is, first line is, Mahamudra does not last, it has no end. It is not samsara, yet not nirvana. Right? So the whole thing is like, it's not that, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. It's not this, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that. And it's this kind of, it's as if to say, well, then, man, like, what the hell is it? And then you sit down and you have a cup of tea and you're like, oh, it's that, right? It's, and it's not that. It's everywhere, it's everything. It's not a thing. It's not a label. It's not a, and so for all of our labeling and our, conceiving and our busyness and our brilliance and, all of the, therefore this means blah, 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 blah. Like just letting go of that and just being, and, is the key. So yes, it has that element of simplicity. And back to Gendon's point, yes, this is often experienced in these other moments of our life that are where there's an element of kind of randomness, so to speak, to them. So, they say there's certain points in time, and I've heard this from Bokor Rinpoche, I've heard this from lots of people, where one experiences, the nature of mind. It can be when you fart, you're or when you sneeze, right? Or when there's orgasm, right? Because everything just, it stops in that way, right? Like there is this part of the mind, it's not the part of the mind, but it's the self-consciousness that just dissolves, right? The friction of constant, back and forth in this dualistic way in that moment stops. So it could be, a beautiful sunset or sunrise, or you're sitting in your, like, my favorite thing, I love my family. My wife takes the kids to school, I pick them up from school. So my favorite thing is to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee once everyone's left and there's sun shining through the windows. And I'm just like, in that moment, I can just, there's this just, this ease, and it's not that Mahamudra can be only experienced without your kids. That's not true. But, again, getting out of the Buddhist meditation industrial complex where it's like, I can only experience this through meditation. I can only do it this way. This is, again, this is the thing, like, it is innate. It is our mind. It is us, right? So we don't need to, spend $19.95 to buy book X and wear Dharma clothes Y and do all this stuff. We can experience this in many, many different ways. Another really good way is, I don't run, but if you run, and because I know people who do this, like run and then collapse down into the grass, especially after a hard sprint, right? And then just rest your body. Or what I do like to do is float in the ocean, right? And you can't be tense and float in the ocean, right? And so you need to really let go and relax, right? And doing that, looking up at the big sky and resting into the nature of mind. There are many, many different ways. Yeah, Lorena, you're in the Mahamudra day. It's Mahamudra Tuesday, Valentine's Day. Jamie.
Hi, I was just wondering, I guess, because I'm quite new to Vajrayana practice, and I've found it to be such a profound teaching, and Mahamudra is just this, an explanation of and guide to non-conceptual awareness. It's a bit less riddle-like than Zen, so it's a bit more like direct, and I found it very powerful, but I've also found it hard to think, or hard to figure out what's appropriate, because it seems like in the Vajrayana there's traditionally at least the most boundaries with are you ready to do this? The idea you have to have become an expert in Hinayana, you have to become an expert in Mahayana, then after 100,000 of this and 100,000 of that, then you can enter these teachings, and then others like yourself that are more open and I guess more democratic about it. So I'm still finding that tension there, and I guess what's your perspective on non-dro, and when are you is it more guided by when you feel that you're ready, or is it, how does it, what's your perspective on that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, thank you. This is a good question, and this is really I think it's a matter of taste. So there's not a right answer to this. I I do what my teachers did, right? And so again, like I said, my root teacher, she introduced Mahamudra and Chekcha without even telling me what it was, right? She's like, hey, let's sit like this, literally, a nice cup of coffee, tea rather. Let's sit like this. And, we're on the roof of this building she lived in. And there's a valley and then a mountain on the other side. So this just massive amount of space, and then she would give a meditation instruction. We would sit together and then stop, drink some tea and repeat. Stop, drink some tea and repeat. And then, the other thing that she was very invested in was, what is this like? Describe this. And I would describe it. It's like, okay, let's do it again. Very like a craftsperson, like an artist trying to be able to convey how it is to throw pottery or paint or something like this, right? Like you can't tell someone, well, this you can't like lecture someone on, this is how you hold a brush, or this is how you hold a charcoal, or this is how you write, right? You have to practice and get some confirmation. This kind of also goes back to Yinden's question is in the best case scenario, the teacher is involved and invested in helping to ensure that this is understood, right? Now, I don't have anything against Nunjo, but again, Nunjo is not necessary to be able to recognize the nature of your mind. I think that also, you could theoretically do Nunjo, the Yidam practice, the yogas, and then practice Mahamudra. But that's not necessary either. And we've seen, again, people like, like Maitrepa, like Gampopa, my root teacher, and even Boke Rinpoche. Boke Rinpoche taught Mahamudra for people outside of the context of Nunjo. He asked that people do a certain amount of Nunjo every year, and made some kind of commitment to eventually finishing it. But the extent to which people would do that, and it was never enforced. There's no real point in that. So I guess the thing is when Mahamudra is a way of life, you can't not want to share it. When Mahamudra is a topic, then it gets filed away in a book and is only read at the appropriate point. I think this is the big thing, right? Same thing with Dzogchen. When Dzogchen is a way of life, well, my gosh, I need to share this because this, relationship to spaciousness transforms our lives. When it becomes something that is, just knowledge-based, well, you need to make sure you have all of the intellectual information before this. But it's not an intellectual process, these kinds of meditations. Right? It often looks intellectual for us, especially, Americans. We'll read these and we're like, well, he says it's not this and it's not that, it's not this and it's not that. Like, what the heck? Like, what does that mean? Like, I clearly need like a, advanced degree to be able to make sense of this. But it's not that. It's essentially poetry, right? And like any other kind of poetry, there's kind of like a situational element to it that's, on one level self-secret. You'll read a poem one day and have a particular kind of experience. You'll read the same thing maybe 6 months later and have a very different experience. And then, 10 years after that, an even different experience. So like with Tilopa's 6 nails, like this is an instruction I've been working very, 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 very closely with since 1995. My root teacher introduced it to me, and then Boke Rinpoche, expounded more on it. And, it's such a basic instruction, but the profundity of what it means is just extraordinary. It is absolutely mind-bendingly like deep. and vast and profound. And in this way, it's a little bit like koan practice in the Zen tradition, right? To sit with an instruction for, I don't know, 20 years or something, or I don't know, more than that, for almost 30 years, right? What does it mean to rest beyond the three times? What does it mean to not control? I mean, really, like, what does it mean to not have any specific outcome in mind? So I think the other thing is like, there's an element of, I mean, I was going to explain one thing, if I could do it two ways. So the first is, this thing I like to share, that if we practice slowly, things arise quickly, right? So there's that. And then I was talking with one of my teachers this morning about this retreat center I'm trying to set up. And he was like, yeah, it just might be one of those things where once you stop looking for the property, it'll just arise. It'll just be there. Like, because there are things like that. So Mahamudra and Dzogchen are very much like this too. Like, the more you strive, the farther you get, and there was an allusion to this in the last song by Saraha. The more attention there is, the more ambition there is, the much further away we end up, right? Even though we think we're going there. But in order to be able to practice these, we just have to have a relationship to ease. And I think that this gets lost a little bit sometimes in how Vajrayana gets presented here in the West in particular, where again, we have this kind of it's always good to be aware of blind spots, and one of our blind spots is an addiction to complex pedagogy, right? So we respect people with PhDs, and then we respect less people with just master's degrees, and we don't respect people with bachelors, and sure as hell don't respect people who don't have GEDs, right? So that same kind of prejudice exists with respect to how we will often organize around Dharma. So if we're like, this commentary, I don't have a big commentary right here, but I have them. This huge fat commentary on Mahamudra is the best because look at how many pages there are. But if you try and read one of those, and I'm sorry to say, they are boring. They're boring. They're hard to connect to. It's somebody else's words. It's often a scholar's words, right? It's not a yogin or yogini's words, right? And those are the ones where there's still this, and I think we really have to spend a little time opening up to the fact that, and I was just going on about this in the Hatha Yoga class about all the different ways that the guru shows up. And Bokor Rinpoche was very, a strong proponent for this. The guru shows up as text. And so when we're reading this, let it be that we're hearing it from Rupa himself. Let us have the direct experience just from this. We don't have to be like, well, shit, man, this is just Keith Damon's translation. Like, there's probably someone's got a better one, a more succinct one. What's the true one? Like, what is the true one? And, I translated one of the songs from this collection of 8 dohas for my book. And, it was great because I had like 3 or 4 other translations to compare it against. And once you immerse yourself into trying to translate a Mahamudra text, you begin to understand that you're really working with something much more complicated than just the words. Like, you are working with for lack of a better term, the spirit of what is being conveyed. So all this is to say that, like, I respect people who really need to take the conservative tack with this. Like, I don't have any problem with that. I think for me though, as a teacher, when I see people suffering, I want to be able to help them alleviate their suffering quickly, right? And it's not to say there's no benefit in Nundro, because there is, and I've guided people through Nundro. but it's not always necessary in this particular case, is my particular feeling. And not everybody's going to like that, but again, this is a little bit like the marketplace. You can go shop somewhere else, that's fine. Like, we don't need your business if you have a problem. I mean, I don't mean you, Jamie, but like, if for instance, someone's like, no, I need to do the whole thing, then yeah, you probably do need to do the whole thing. And, excellent, go for it, but at least we have historical precedent enough to demonstrate that this style of teaching is, extends at the very least back to, 10th century, 11th century. Yeah, Melissa. Oh, I think you're muted or something.
Sorry. Ironically, I had a dream about you last night, and a student was being very pompous and totally misunderstanding the teachings, and you got very Vajra and called her a cake decorator, which I think is very funny, right? Because there's cake and there's what we put on top of it. So I thought that's funny. But I wanted to get back to something, Gyandan, I took your question with a certain slant, and I don't know if that's what you even mean. And I feel Lorena is getting at that too, in that, how do we differentiate between different states of minds and yams and feelings? And is there a different quality to the experience of awareness that we recognize? Or is it more like you're talking about with your teacher, which I think is really amazing, this method of meditating with you and saying, what was that like, and doing the meditation again, which I think is some of what you're doing with us.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Yeah. So the first part of the question is about what to do when yam or experiences arise. Yeah. Well, so it's too early now, but in a couple months we can go to our local botanic garden and walk around, and you will see everything. Right? You'll see grasses, you'll see flowers, you'll see bees, you'll see squirrels, you'll see all of this movement, right? And so in those moments, we can just let everything be, or we can begin to preference these different things as they happen. Oh, there's a squirrel. Oh, but that flower is better. Oh, but the smell of that, what is that? Oh, look at that tree. Oh, that bird. Oh, that person. We can chase after each one, or we can just let them be. Right? Nyam is not to be ignored. Experience is not to be ignored, but these experiences are not meant to be chased after either. Right? So I think what sometimes happens is we can be meditating, and a particular experience happens, and we're like, oh yes, I've got something to report. It's like, check. I'm gonna be ready for that meeting. So and again, that's natural. Like that's just a thing that happens, right? And so release, when the tightness of noticing, and especially noticing in a split dualistic way, that tightness happens, open. And if the experience is still there, let it be. Right? Just let it be there. Let it be there like an old friend, right? Somebody you've known for a long time, and you don't need to stop what you're doing. They don't need you to stop what you're doing. You don't need to stop what you're doing. You can just be there. And then just see what happens next.
And so will we recognize awareness if we experience it? have a different quality.
Well, yeah. So I mean, the the like, a full-blown experience of Rigpa, or a full-blown experience of the vastness of awareness. Yeah, we will notice that. That is, a like, I want to say there's a somatic quality to the experience, but I also don't want to say that, because then we're going to be searching our bodies. Oh, where's this in my belly? Oh, my here, it's there, it's there. I'm feeling in my body that has so many nerves. So of course you're feeling in your body that has so many nerves. Let go. So just like notice, and again, like I was talking with somebody earlier today about the mind-body relationship, and everyone's like, the mind-body relationship, it's so important. And yes, it is. And here we are, like, embodied in our body. And when we meditate, we feel things. And so just be a thermometer or a weather vane, right? Just let whatever is happening and notice. We'll find, like, this doesn't happen to me now because my life is relatively, not full of like the violence of Rikers Island. But when I used to lead meditation on Rikers Island, you get into, you just make your way right into a jail facility right as it was going on a lockdown, going off, people are suiting up to go, secure a housing area, so your body's going crazy, right? Even though, like, I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times, you smell the pepper spray, like all of this stuff, right? And then you sit down to lead a meditation session and it's like, oh, like, wow, there's a lot in my body, right? And just, as we settle, the body settles too, and so really, like, the nyam are like, when I was little, I used to really, like, really little, I used to be really obsessed with how, like, whenever my parents would drive us somewhere, like, the first time you go somewhere, it feels like it takes forever. It's like a half an hour drive and you're like, oh my God, when are we going to be there yet? When are we going to be there? Second time, it's a little shorter. Third time, it's shorter. Fifth time, sixth time, seventh time, it's 15th time, you're already there. Like, you're already habituated to this. And so the quite similarly, the more we show up to our practice, the more the experience of nyam will come and go, but we don't, it's not a big deal. It's like wind or thoughts, like thought activity, like, a profoundly beautiful thought might happen, or an emotion. Like, I guess I have a question for the group. Like, when you're sitting, is there no emotion or no thought activity or no experience? Or, right, yeah. And so when you're sitting there, to what extent can you just let it all flow? Like a like a mountain stream, right? Just letting it come and letting it go. Sometimes you can, and sometimes we might zoom in on something, or there might be something that's a little triggering, right? And I don't mean like, bad trauma necessarily, but like, I don't know, I wonder when Sadra's translation of the Marpa Kaju volume of the Kaju Natso will be released. I know exactly when it will be released, but I wonder, I can't wait for that day. What's that day going to feel like? It's going to feel incredible, right? So that kind of thought, that's more my, like, nerdy stuff, right? Like, oh, drool, So let have that drooly thought and just let it go, because it hasn't been released yet. I've already pre-ordered it, so it'll come on the day it's released. So I don't need to worry. And then the next thing will come whenever it does. Well, but the key point being whenever, right? Giving ourselves the opportunity for there to be space. And then, of course, like, in all of this is this idea of things being self-liberated as they arise. So again, like, this is a big idea at first for many people. You might hear like Rang Sha or Rang Zhuo, like, self-arising, self-liberated. And at first, there is some intellectual work. Oh, wow, self-arisen. What does that mean? And then self-liberated. What does that mean? And so, then we need to just sit and, have a relationship to practice. And again, as we rest into awareness, I mean, where in the world did that thought about the Marpa volume of the Kajinatsu come from? It didn't, Amazon hopefully didn't implant something in my brain to try and get me to think about it. Right? Or Tsadra, maybe they did. Maybe there's a terma. But right, so where do these things come from? Where do the impulses come from? Self-arisen. And then what does it mean for them to be self-liberated? Right, so it's more than just, watching it come and go. It's understanding what it is. Self-arising, naturally liberated phenomenon. So even, stop to look at something right in front of you. There's anything that arises is self-arising, right? It's just coming. And self-liberated in the sense that it has no essence, right? It has no, there's no birth canal for that thought or experience from which it arose. Naturally liberated, right? It doesn't have it's not arising with malice, right? Or with, it's not arising with great love either. It's just there. Self-liberating. And then when we stay with it, where does it go? Does it sprout legs and walk away? And so this is where, like, practice slowly, or arrive quickly really does make a lot of sense, because and again, to do this in a light-hearted way, not this analytic, like, no offense to Madhyamaka, I really don't want to make, but like, that's too much work for me. That's too, my brain, like, I really do think I probably am like dyslexic with numbers. And I was reading recently about the specific term for that. I can't remember what it is. But I also feel that way about, like, overly organized text, like a lot of these, Tibetan style commentaries where point A, point, 8.1, 8.12, blah, it's just like, but if we just stay and are gently there, we will learn from that more than we will learn from anything we'll learn from a commentary. And that's much better too, because, again, with the commentary, you're learning someone else's words and experience. And it could be somebody very profoundly realized, but that's not the same. It is not the same. Especially because if when you're on your deathbed and you're trying to rest into the nature of mind, and you forgot the words in the commentary, well, that's not so good. But if it's indelibly kind of, part of your experience of practice, it's going to show up. And that's important. Oh yeah, Melissa.
I'll be quick. So it's very profound what you're saying. And are you basically, I mean, in some way, I feel like you're saying, if we follow these instructions, advice from, gurus we have a connection with or that we trust, right? That it may take a second, it may take lifetimes, but we will experience Ati mind, nature mind.
Yeah,
that-
nature minor, yeah, Ati or Mahamudra. Yeah, I mean, I personally believe that the mind is naturally moving towards awakening all the time as it is. And we have a kind of very interesting non-trusting relationship to it, where we feel like we need to be the shepherd. I don't trust my mind. My mind, man, like, that mind is wily. That mind wants to escape. That mind can't be trusted. I mean, like, that makes zero sense. Like that, how does that make sense? Like, if we're to truly understand, like, what the essence of mind is within the context of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, it's already completed. Right? It's already clear. It's already vast as space. It's responsive. It's creative. It's all of these things. Right? So this, again, it is patriarchal in tone. This need to beat it into submission, so to speak, through meditation is absolutely bizarre. Like, I mean, I really can't. And the thing is like, it's not because I'm like one of those old-fashioned people. It's like, oh, it's anybody after 12th century just sucks. It's not saying, I'm not saying that. But when you look at these early dohas, everybody says it. Everybody's like, it's here. You don't need to do anything. And they weren't like, well, my guru gave me the handbook. And he told me to tell you this, and it was just a game of telephone. No, these are people who experienced it. I remember after a year after Bokor Rinpoche died. So Bokor Rinpoche died, and then for a year there were constant pujas done in front of his body. His body was preserved in salt, in a mardum, and I was there when the body was being transferred into this beautiful Kalachakra stupa at his monastery, and Karmapa was there, and Gyaltsen Rinpoche was there, and Jangda Rinpoche was there, and there were people from all over. And Gyaltsen Rinpoche was teaching this. I have the transcript. I've been meaning to. I'll find it, and I'll see if I can recopy it, because it's an old, like, Xerox. But he taught on the kind of like union of Mahamudra and Asanga's, or it was Maitreya's Anuttara Shastra, and he's talking about Mahamudra. And he's going on and on and on. And he turns to Bokor Rinpoche's translator, and he just starts laughing. And he told the translator, he's like, these fools don't know anything. They haven't experienced anything. I could tell by the look on their face, And Nujop, the translator, had told me afterwards that that's what he had said. And it wasn't that he thought that everybody was a fool. It's just that, like, this is how hard it is. It's like, it is. And again, it's not that it's hard. It's that this is how easy it is to misapprehend, what it's all about. So everyone's there, like, writing, he's like, that's not what it is. Some people are like, really sternly meditating. That's not what it is either. Some people are gossiping. No, that's not what it is. And of course, maybe it's a lot of some of that. Right. But the, just giving ourselves some room to experience the flow is really important. Get out of our heads. Trust the instructions. Trust the Dharma. Direct transmission can happen. I mean, direct transmission can happen in many ways, right? It can happen in dreams. Like I've had a direct transmission of the nature of mind from dreams. It can happen from text. You read something, and I had the most like profound experience. And I guess we should wrap it up. But when I was in high school, I was a really nerdy person. I didn't like didn't like having fun, believe it or not. And I was going to this party at a girl's house. I had a huge crush on her, and I had this I was taking this long subway ride, and I was a little like, oh God, like I can't believe I'm like going on this long subway ride to this party and all this stuff. But I had this the Sutra of Huineng, and the platforms, it was by John Blofield, the translation. It's the Platform Sutra on one side, and then oh God, I have a copy of it somewhere. And I remember reading one passage, and I had no idea where I was. Like I was on the A train, like going uptown, right? But I was just transported completely, just reading this one thing. And this is the thing about like the Chan masters. Like I'm definitely not sectarian about this. Like in Chan, there is a tremendously powerful like transmission process that happens. And when I was reading this, I was just completely blown away. Like I got to the party and I was like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Like, like my mind just got blown. Like, I don't know, like, but so it happens in many ways, and for us to be open to the whole diversity of it, it can happen through, external symbol. It can happen through change of weather. It can happen through something somebody says. It can happen through what a physical guru says. But ultimately everything is the guru. Everything has the opportunity to be pointing out the nature of mind to us. Everything. There's nothing in this universe that does not transmit Mahamudra or Hatha Yoga to us. There's nothing. And when we're able to begin to kind of like open up to that, then, the need for classical learning begins to kind of, melt away. And this is the thing that differentiates, the kind of Mahasiddha path from, the scholar path. And again, two sides of the same coin. One is not better than the other, right? But also like we have different predilections. Like I learned, actually, it was my root teacher who pointed this out to me. She's like, don't go to grad school. Like you're not you're not as smart as you think, basically. But she was much more kind. She was like, that's not how you're going to get it. Like, I am basically saying like, I'm of a lineage of, we directly experience, like, this is what we do, this is what you should do. And I'm grateful to her, like that's what, because I definitely listened to her, because she was wise, realized, and had so much more experience than I even have now. And there's a typology thing, others are other ways, and that's totally fine. So what is it, Dr. Need to say? Know your talent, right? Know your talent, know who you are, right? I think this is a good piece of advice, right? If you're not a baker, don't take out a loan to start a bakery, so yeah. Anyway, so in this moment, let's dedicate the merit to all the Mahasiddhas and scholars. May they be able to get along. May all the Mahasiddhas and scholars be able to manifest as needed in every possible way, in every single little and big experience of the universe. May every being in the universe be able to recognize their mind as open, vast, spacious luminosity. And may they be able to experience this in the everyday moments. Or may these everyday moments lead us closer and closer to awakening. Take care, everybody. Be well, and happy Valentine's Day. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This is so
Thank
helpful.
you.
Um,